still.
I took my salsa. That's okay. I'll eat them with my salsa today.
Just put them on a bag if you want. But they still. Sorry.
It's okay.
We can get up nothing. I don't throw them.
Yeah.
Throw this on top. And then turn them upside down.
Hey, good morning. I missed you too. How's everybody? What's everybody up to this morning? How's everyone spending their day off? If you have one. Weekend was good. How was yours? The wedding was beautiful. Aw, hi Liz. I missed all of you too. I thought I was going to be able to read more when my niece and nephew went to bed with these two. Oh no, oh no. Wah, wah. That's funny. That's funny. That is funny. Rebecca. What's up, folks? Is anyone doing anything interesting today? I will be working. Oh, that's right. Are you going to send pictures? The wedding was beautiful. It was so sweet. So sweet. All right. We're making coffee, we're making moves, we're doing things. You know, the whole kit and caboodle. The whole kit and caboodle. How long is that going to take, AC? Is it going to be like a big one or a little one? Oh, yeah, they're fake. I had to put them on so that I could look nice for the wedding despite having the crappy nails that I have right now. So I put on fake ones. It's true. It's true, it's true. Yesterday my niece and my pillows off. I'm like, oh no! That sounds not good. 3 hours-ish. Excited for hand. Oh, so like this. Kind of. Ish. Give or take. That's not too bad. Not too bad. been wondering where the uploads are for the previous days, YouTube has been having some issues uploading them, so I'm going to put them into an editor, try to change the file a little bit, and then try to upload them again because they've all been like having upload errors, which is kind of weird. I tried re-downloading them from TikTok to see if that was the issue, and it wasn't. Morning, Wanda. So I'll try that today as a part of my list of things to do. Hey, Grace. Book club. Woohoo. Oh. Huh? Thank you. I will. I will. Ooh, perfect. Look at that. That is a perfect pour. The wedding was beautiful. Thank you. It was beautiful. We had a lovely time. Lovely, lovely. I'm at the beach and I missed my Nespresso. Oh yeah, I've missed the Nespresso all weekend, but here it is, has returned to me, or I've returned to it. Walking through the jungle real quick. There's my jungle. Mm-mm-mm. Mm-mm-mm. Seriously, Grace, we bought coffee this weekend and I forgot how expensive it was to buy coffee out compared to getting espresso. My gosh. My gosh. It's so different. All right, we are back. We are front. We are all here. Can you guys believe that we are pretty much halfway done with this book? I can't even believe it. It feels like we just started it, but we're like almost halfway done. Me too, Kristen. Me too. Big time. I don't care who says it's the same. It's not. Yeah, that's crazy, Grace. I know. It's wild, but we will, hello. We will obviously read the next two that are in the series. So, you know, that's great, but like, still wild. Wild, wild, wild. All right, so where are we? We are on chapter 9. Chapter 9 is called Madame Weatherbury's Academy of Magic. Oh, the question here is, did she officially come up with a name? Because for 9 chapters now, actually in 9 chapters and a prologue, she has been debating what the name of this school is going to be. So it'll be funny to see if the Looney Bin, what about the Looney Bin? What the name's going to be. So let us read and we will see what the name is. After leaving the mine, Emeralda tried her best to remain unimpressed by Madame Weatherbury's magic as possible. When the fairy transformed 4 field mice into unicorns, Emeralda's eyes grew very large, but she didn't make a sound. When Madame Weatherbury removed the brooch from her gown and turned it into a golden carriage, Emeralda's breathing increased, but she didn't say a word. True, Becca. However, as the unicorns transported them across the southern kingdom at an extraordinary speed, Emeralda was having a difficult time concealing her amazement. Isn't this spectacular? Xanthos said. If you whip your head around really fast like this, you can catch a glimpse of the land. The boy gave Emeralda an example and she almost tried it herself, but then she remembered to keep her appearances unenthusiastic. Bristol giggled at Emeralda's failing facade. You know, it's okay to be a little excited, Bristol said. No matter what we see or do, nothing will ever make the mine any less special to you. Emeralda pursed her lips to suppress a smile, but it surfaced anyway. All right, I admit, this is pretty amazing, she said. For fun, the dwarves and I used to run race cars through the mine, but we never went as fast as this. How are the unicorns even doing this? Well, they're compelled by magic, Madame Weatherbury explained. Not only are unicorns the fastest animals on the planet, they also always know their passengers' exact destination and the quickest route to get there. Are we close to the academy?
Emeralda asked. Oh, it'll take a couple of hours to reach the Southern Kingdom's eastern border, and then it's a short distance through the in-between, Madam Weatherberry said. We should arrive just before sunset.
We aren't getting out of this carriage until then, are we? Xanthos said.
No, unfortunately not, Madam Weatherberry said. As much as I would love to teach you another lesson at the expense of a hostile creature, there's a special path in the forest that the unicorns know to take.
Madam Weatherberry, I keep forgetting to ask, but what is the academy? Bristol inquired. Is it a house? Is it a cabin? Is it a cave? Madam Weatherberry smiled playfully as she thought about her academy.
Oh, you'll see, the fairy said. Some things in life are better seen than described.
A couple of hours later, the golden carriage approached the eastern border of the southern kingdom. Just like the western border, the thick forest of the in-between grew along the eastern border like a gigantic twisted fence. The trees were so close together that there was barely room for a person to walk between them. But the unicorns charged ahead. They found an opening Bristol would never have spotted on her own, and the steeds pulled the golden carriage onto the narrow road. Hey, Anya. As they traveled through the in-between, the unicorns slowed down to guide the carriage safely through the winding path. Bristol was unsettled by the eerie sights of the dark forest outside her window. She expected a ferocious animal or a monstrous creature to jump out from the darkness and attack their carriage at any moment. Bristol figured Xanthos and Emeralda were feeling the same way because both her companions had covered their eyes and sunk down in their seats. Good morning, honey. We already said good morning to you, sweetheart. You don't have to keep saying it, honey. We've already seen you. Don't worry, hon. Don't worry. Just listen and enjoy. It's okay. Unsurprisingly, Madam Weatherberry wasn't affected by the frightening surroundings at all. The fairy kept a confident and watchful eye on the trees passing by, like she was prepared for whoever or whatever might cross their path. Time seemed to move much slower in the in-between than it had in the southern kingdom, but eventually the golden carriage came to an abrupt stop. Bristol, Emeralda, and Xanthos looked out the window and saw that the unicorns had stopped because the road was blocked by a massive hedge wall. The strange plant was taller than the trees and stretched for miles in both directions. The leaves and branches were so thick the hedge was practically solid. "We're here," Madam Weatherberry said cheerfully. Her students had no idea what the fairy was talking about. The longer the unicorns stayed put at the dead end, the more they felt like sitting ducks in a dangerous forest. Suddenly, the hedge started to shake and snap. The leaves and branches slowly parted to form an arch that was wide enough for the carriage to fit through. The unicorns moved under the arch and entered a long, leafy tunnel that cut through the thick hedge. The passageway went on for several hundred feet, and the children were amazed by how dense the hedge was. It was so dark in the tunnel that Bristol couldn't see her hands in front of her face. "Madam Weatherberry, what is this?" Bristol asked.
"Oh, it's just a little barrier I planted around the property to protect the academy," Madam Weatherberry said.
"A little barrier?" Xanthos said. "The shrub is enormous." Do you think this is that big shrub thing that they came upon where you can tuss things in Land of Stories? So cool.
"It may seem like overgrown shrubbery, but the hedge is actually equipped with a very, very powerful magical spell," Madam Weatherberry said. "It only opens for people and animals with magic in their blood. It'll keep us safe for all the restless creatures wandering the in-between."
The unicorns reached the end of the tunnel and stopped at another leafy wall. Beams of bright light shone in the dark tunnel as a second arch opened and granted the carriage access to Madam Weatherberry's property. The unicorns exited the hedge barrier, and their young passengers realized they weren't in the creepy woods anymore. The golden carriage proceeded down the path into a rolling field of the most vibrant wildflowers the children had ever seen. The land was sprinkled with trees that were covered in colorful maple leaves, blushing cherry blossoms, and blooming magnolias. A crystal clear lake was lined with weeping willows and spilled into streams and ponds with vivid water lilies. The picturesque estate stretched towards a cliff overlooking the sparkling blue ocean, where the sun was setting in a horizon of rosy clouds. I don't believe it, Bristol said. It's like we're inside a painting. I have never seen so much color in my entire life, Esmeralda exclaimed. We must be dead, Xanthos said. Our carriage crashed in the forest and now we're in paradise. It's the only explanation. Madame Weatherbury was incredibly touched by the excitement on her students' faces.
I've waited a long time to see smiles like those, she said. Many years of hard work have been put in developing this place. I hope it becomes as much your home as it is mine.
The carriage continued down the path, and there were more surprises at every turn. Bristol was mesmerized when she saw that there were herds of unicorns grazing and frolicking throughout the fields around them. She looked up and noticed the sky was filled with huge, colorful butterflies and enormous birds with long auburn feathers. Look at all the unicorns in the field, she said. And up there, have you ever seen such big, bright birds and butterflies before? I've seen some pretty nasty bugs and bats in the mine, but nothing like those, Esmeralda said. Madame Weatherbury chuckled.
Actually, those aren't birds or butterflies, she said. You might want to take a closer look.
Bristol, Esmeralda, and Xanthos pressed their faces against the window for a better view, and after thorough inspection, the children realized the butterflies had tiny human-like bodies, and they wore clothing made of leaves and flower petals. The tiny creatures flew in and out of miniature mushroom homes along the path. The birds in question had heads and wings like eagles, front claws like reptiles, and hind legs and tails like lions. They soared through the sky like hawks and brought squirrels and mice and fish and other prey to the hungry hatchlings waiting in their nests. What the heck are those things? Xanthos asked.
Well, they're pixies and griffins, Madame Weatherbury said. And they're both easily offended, so make sure you never call them bugs or birds to their faces.
So they still exist? Bristol asked. In The Truth About Magic, you wrote that humankind hunted all the magical animals into extinction.
Well, they nearly did, Madame Weatherbury said. Fortunately, I was able to find some survivors and save a few species before they were lost forever. It was safer to let humanity go on believing that they had annihilated them. Sadly, I wasn't able to rescue all the magical animals that used to roam the earth. This property is as much a sanctuary for the pixies and griffins and unicorns as it is for us.
Esmeralda gasped and pointed out the window. Is that what I think it is? She asked. Bristol and Xanthos looked in the direction Esmeralda was referring to and had the same reaction. In the distance, perched on the edge of a cliff overhanging the ocean, was a golden castle. The castle had tall, pointed towers and hundreds of wide windows, and the entire structure sparkled in the sunlight. The carriage continued on the path through the property and stopped at the castle's front steps. Madame Weatherbury escorted the children outside and gestured excitedly to the castle before them. That's very funny, Becca. Yes, Madame Weatherbury is that girl. She's saving all the little animals. She's like, hello.
Welcome to Madame Weatherbury's Academy of Magic, the fairy said. What do you think of the new name? I decided less was more.
Bristol, Xanthos, and Esmeralda didn't respond because they were completely overwhelmed by the dazzling structure in front of them. Madame Weatherbury was right. Some things in life were better seen than described. Even after all the incredible books she had read in the library, Bristol doubted words could ever explain the castle's magnificent appearance or the exhilarating feeling that it gave her. It was difficult to believe that something so beautiful existed in this world, but the castle never faded from her view. Madame Weatherbury clapped her hands and the unicorns were released from their reins. The steeds galloped into the nearby field and joined the grazing herd. She snapped her fingers to shrink the golden carriage to a brooch again and pinned it to her gown. The castle's giant front doors opened and the two little girls and an old woman came out to greet the new arrivals. Who's the old woman? We know who the two little girls are, but who's the old woman? It's Tangerine and Skylene from the prologue, I assume. The first little girl was about 10 years old, and she wore a dress made from dripping patches of honeycomb. Her bright orange hair was styled into a beehive and was home to a living swarm of bumblebees. The second little girl also looked 10 years old, and she wore a navy robe over a sapphire bathing suit, and instead of hair, a continuous stream of water flowed down her body and evaporated as it reached her feet, like she was a walking waterfall. The old woman was dressed much more simply than the girls, and she wore a plum dress with a matching apron. She had a grayish-violet hair in a messy bun, but other than her unusual hair color, her appearance wasn't as magical as the others.
Children, I'd like you to meet Miss Tangerina Turkin, Miss Skyline Lavenders, and the Academy's housekeeper, Miss V, Madame Weatherbury said. Girls, these are our new students, Bristol Evergreen, Emeralda Stone, and Xanthos Hayfield.
Mrs. V was ecstatic to see the newcomers. She hurried down the front steps and gave each of them a huge bear hug, rocking them back and forth. We need a voice for her. She could be... Oh, I don't mean to invade your personal space, but I'm just so happy I could burst, Mrs. B said with tearful eyes. Madame Weatherbury's been dreaming of opening this academy here for so long, and the day's finally here. I hope you've all brought an appetite, because I am cooking up a feast, and don't you have any allergies or anything, dietary restrictions that I should know about? Bristol and Emeralda and Xanthos all shrugged and shook their head. Well, that's big relief, Mrs. B said. Tonight, I'm serving one of my specialties, Griffin pot pie. Just kidding. Oh, you should have seen the looks on your faces. I'd never cook something like that. Besides, Griffins are too fast to catch. Anyway, get you inside. But in all seriousness, I couldn't have been more thrilled to have you. Now, if you'll excuse me, I better get back to the kitchen before dinner grows legs and runs away. Anyway, based on that true story, that is based on a true story. Anyways, I'll see you inside. Mrs. V hurried back up the front steps and dashed into the castle. Bristol, Xanthos, and Emeralda were slightly terrified after meeting the animated housekeeper and looked to Madame Weatherbury for reassurance.
Don't worry, Mrs. V's cooking is much better than her comedy.
Although the housekeeper seemed eccentric and goofy, Bristol, Xanthos, and Emeralda appreciated her attempt to welcome them to the academy. Tangerine and Skyline, however, stayed on the castle's front steps and eyed the newcomers like they were competition of some kind. Bristol sensed the tension and tried to break the ice. I love what you're both wearing, she said. Are you students too? Tangerine and Skyline both grunted, insulted by Bristol's comment. We're apprentices, Tangerine said in a condescending tone. What's the difference? Bristol asked. We apprentice things, Skyline said like it was obvious. Bristol, Xanthos, and Emeralda looked at one another as if to see if Skyline made sense to anyone else, but no one knew what that girl was talking about. Tangerina was embarrassed by her friend's remark and quickly pulled her aside. Skyline, I told you to let me do all the talking when the newbies showed up, she whispered. Oh, I thought you said new bees, Skyline whispered. I thought you were finally doing something different with your hair. You never listen, Tangerina said. You've got too much water in your ears. Skyline tilted her head to the left and then to the right, and sure enough, over a gallon of water poured out from both ears. Tangerina rolled her eyes at her friend and turned back to the newcomers. As I was saying, apprentices are much more advanced than students, she explained. We're going to assist Madame Weatherbury as she teaches the three of you to use your magic. And now that you're here, you can see, and I can see, that she's going to need all the help she can get.
Tangerina, be nice to the new students, Madame Weatherbury said. We'll all be learning and growing together no matter how advanced some of us may be. But we can discuss all of that in our first lesson tomorrow. In the meantime, let's give our new recruits a tour of the castle while Mrs. V finishes preparing dinner.
The fairy escorted her students and apprentices up the front steps and through the castle's front doors. Bristol's mouth dropped open at her first glimpse of the castle's interior because it was just as breathtaking as the exterior. The entrance hall had shimmering white walls, sparkling silver floors, and golden pillars that stretched into a towering ceiling above them. In the center of the hall was a gigantic tree that grew crystal leaves and blossoms. An elegant staircase curled around the tree, and steps floated in mid-air as the stairs spiraled towards the upper levels of the castle.
This castle is one of the last magical residences left, Madame Weatherbury said. The majority of them were destroyed when King Champion I declared that magic was a crime. I inherited the estate from my family, and I've kept it hidden and protected ever since. It's very important that none of you leave the property without me. As you know, the in-between is full of people and creatures who would like to harm us.
Something about Madame Weatherbury's warning didn't sit well with Bristol. Madame Weatherbury? She asked. I thought you said your family was human.
The fairy was pleasantly surprised by Bristol's attention to detail. "Oh, I forgot to mention that," Madam Weatherbury said. "While my birth family were human, I was referring to the fairies who adopted me and taught me to develop my magic. You see, the magical community is lucky because we get to create new families if our relatives forsake us. The 6 of us may not be blood related, but with time, I hope we'll regard each other as chosen family." Since they'd all just met, it was hard for Bristol to picture becoming that close with the other students. Still, it was nice to imagine someone could fill the void created by leaving her mother and brothers behind. "Now, if you'll follow me, I'll show you the sitting room," Madam Weatherbury said. The fairy led them down the corridor to the right of the entrance hall, and they entered a spacious room with silk sofas and tufted lounge chairs. The walls were covered in floral wallpaper and decorated with heads of horned animals. Once they stepped inside the sitting room, the flowers and vines on the wallpaper became three-dimensional, and a flowery aroma filled the air. The deer and elk heads mounted on the wall came to life and snacked on the plants around them. "Be careful around the decorative heads. They do like to bite," Madam Weatherbury warned. "Moving on, the dining room is just around the corner." Down the hall from the sitting room was another large room with a table made from wide, flat rock. The dining room was illuminated by a cluster of glowing moonstones that hovered over the table like a chandelier. The walls were dark and decorated with twinkling lights so that the room looked like a starry night sky. As Bristol examined the lights, she screamed when a shooting star suddenly shot across the ceiling. "Well, breakfast is served every morning at 7 o'clock sharp. Lunch starts at noon, and dinner begins at 6 o'clock, Madam Weatherbury informed them. "Please, do be on time for meetings and meals. Mrs. V is a perfectionist when it comes to her food, and she does hate serving cold dishes. The kitchen is through the swinging door just at the end of the dining room, and Mrs. V's chambers are just beyond that. Well, that's everything on the first floor. Now, if you'll please follow me to the back entrance, I'll show you to my office on the second floor."
But Madam Weatherbury, Xanthos asked, "you said this was a school, so where are all the classrooms?"
"Well, there aren't any classrooms in my castle," the fairy said. "I'll be teaching the majority of the lessons outside on the academic grounds. I've always thought fresh ideas are easier retained with fresh air." The tour returned to the entrance hall as they carefully climbed the floating staircase to the second level of the castle. Madam Weatherbury's office was through a pair of wooden doors. Just like the cover of The Truth About Magic, they were engraved with the images of a unicorn and a griffin. Morning, Renee. The office was a circular chamber with incredible views of the ocean and the academy property. All the furniture was made of glass, including a bulky desk that sat at the far end of the room. The chamber was lined with shelves of spell books, cabinets of potions and elixirs. The high ceiling was filled with fluffy white clouds that changed into the shape of different animals as they blobbed up and down, and instead of fire, a stream of bubble emitted from the grand fireplace and floated through the air. The entire wall above the fireplace was covered in a massive replica of the map of magic. To the students' amusement, a rack of elaborate fascinators was placed by Madam Weatherbury's desk, and the fairy owned a hat in every color. "If you ever need something, please don't hesitate to find me in here," Madam Weatherbury said. "However, on the rare occasion I'm called away from the academy, my office is off limits to students."
Hey, Lainey.
"Well, if there aren't any questions, I'll show you to your bedrooms on the 3rd floor.
"We'll have our own rooms?" Xanthos asked.
"Oh, yes," Madam Weatherbury said. "The castle has 7 bedrooms and counting."
"What do you mean, and counting?" Emeralda asked.
"Well, it's one of the many perks of living inside a magical residence," Madam Weatherbury explained. "The castle grows extra bedrooms based on the number of residents, and usually designs the chambers around the occupant's specific needs. There were only bedrooms for Tangerina and Skyline on the 3rd floor when I left the castle to recruit you, but now there should be one for each of you. Shall we take a look?"
The students eagerly followed Madam Weatherbury up the stairs to a long corridor on the 3rd floor. Just as she predicted, the corridor had 5 doors, and the latter 3 looked much newer than the first 2. Like the corridor had been recently renovated. As they passed the first door, the students peered inside Tangerina's bedroom and instantly understood what Madam Weatherbury meant about the rooms being designed for the residents' needs. All the walls and the furniture in Tangerine's bedroom were made of honeycomb, and everything was drenched in honey, just like her hair.
The chamber was the home of thousands of buzzing bumblebees, and the floor was covered with live daisies to provide the swarm with nectar. The room across the corridor from Tangerine's bedroom belonged to Skylene. The chamber had no floor, and instead it dropped into a straight indoor pool. Every inch of the room was tiled with blue porcelain, and the only piece of furniture was a gondola bed floating on the pool's surface. The third room in the corridor had a heavy steel door, and Madame Weatherberry grunted as she heaved it open. "Oh, Xanthos, I'm assuming this one belongs to you," she said. Inside, the entire room was made of the same industrial steel as the door. There were no windows in the chamber, and absolutely nothing was flammable. Even Xanthos' metal bed had foil sheets, and instead of carpet or tile, the floor was finished with metal grates, and instead of a ceiling, a brick chimney was built over the room. "It's like a giant oven," Xanthos said enthusiastically. "Even if I take off my metal, I couldn't hurt anyone in here." "It's the perfect place for you to blow off some steam," Madame Weatherberry said. "Now, Emeralda, I do believe that your room is next." Behind the fourth door in the corridor was a dark room with dirt walls. There was a 4-poster bed made from stalagmites and a wardrobe constructed out of a minecart and a workbench that held stacks of coal. Emeralda stepped inside her room and felt a dizzying moment of deja vu. "Just like in my cave at the mine," she said. "It even smells like the dwarves in here." "Well, hopefully that'll keep you from getting too homesick," Madame Weatherberry said. "And last but not least, we'll have Bristol's room." The fifth and final door in the corridor led to the base of a tower. There was a bed identical to the bed she had in the Evergreen household, a big, comfy armchair exactly like the one she enjoyed in the Chariot Hills library. But most amazing of all, the walls were covered with shelves of books from the floor to the ceiling. A display case in the corner of the room held 24 pairs of reading glasses, and like Madame Weatherberry's collection of fascinators, there was a pair in every color. As Bristol looked around her new bedroom, her eyes filled with happy tears. Her heart fluttered in her chest. She scanned the titles on the shelves and caressed the book spines like she was saying hello to long-lost friends. "The Tales of Tippet the Twitch, volumes 2 through 10. She was shocked to find them. "I didn't even know there was one sequel, let alone 9 sequels. "Oh, and look at this," Madame Weatherberry said, and she pointed to another book on the shelves. "You'll even have a copy of The Truth About Magic. Perhaps you'll be inspired to finish it one of these days. No pressure, of course. Well, children, that completes our tour of the castle. You're more than welcome to inspect the other rooms and towers, but I am afraid you'll only find a century's worth of storage and dust." Suddenly, a chime rang through the castle to announce the start of dinner. Unlike the gong at Bootstrap Correctional Facility, the chimes here were pleasant and inviting, like they were announcing the start of a grand performance. "Well, it sounds like Mrs. V is finally ready for us," Madame Weatherberry said. "Let's not keep her waiting." The students followed Madame Weatherberry down the corridor, but Bristol stayed in her room for a few moments longer before joining them. Of all the astonishing things she had seen today, nothing was more beautiful than the sight of her own library. At dinner, the students were served a 3-course meal of tomato soup, grilled chicken with roast carrots, and blueberry pie. Other than the colorful berries and muffins Bristol ate in the golden carriage, it was the most delicious food she had ever tasted. She couldn't believe that she would be treated to 3 meals like this every day. It was quite a contrast to the food at the Bootstrap Correctional Facility. Over the meal, Madame Weatherberry told the new students stories about the obstacles she faced while starting the academy. She recalled how she met with sovereigns of all 4 kingdoms, and despite her persuasive requests, only granted permission by King Champion XIV to recruit students from the Southern Kingdom. Bristol, Xanthos, and Emeralda were on the edge of their seats listening to her exciting tales. "May I have some more water?" Xanthos asked after stuffing his face with a 3rd helping of blueberry pie. "I can help you with that," Skylene said. She leaned over the table and stuck her hand in the boy's glass. A stream of water poured out of her index finger and filled the glass to the brim. Bristol and Emeralda were impressed by Skylene's trick, but Xanthos was disturbed by the liquid coming out of her body. Is there any other water?" he asked. All 7 people at the table, Tangerine seemed to be enjoying herself the least. She grunted at everything the newcomer said and rolled her eyes at every question they asked. She found their curiosity about magic to be incredibly irritating, like they should have been more prepared before arriving. "So, what do you do?" she asked. "Sorry?" Bristol said. "Well, I know you're all here because you can do magic, so what are your specialties?" Tangerine asked. "What's a specialty?" Bristol asked. Tangerine and Skylene were shocked by her ignorance.
A specialty is your strongest magical talent, Tangerina explained. It's usually the trait that reveals your magic and separates you from the rest of the world. Bees are my specialty, water is Skylene's, and based on his room upstairs, I'm guessing that Xanthos' specialty has something to do with fire.
Oh, that's why his room is made of metal, Skylene said. I was hoping it has had something to do with barbecue. How disappointing.
Tangerina ignored her friend. As I was saying, she went on, Xanthos was easy to figure out, but I'm still not sure about you two. Emeralda was a little annoyed by Tangerina's need to categorize them. She closed her eyes and placed an open palm on the stone table and transformed the entire thing into a giant amethyst. That's what I do, she said blankly. Despite their best attempts to conceal it, Tangerina and Skylene were awestruck by Emeralda's demonstration.
What about you, Bristol? Skylene asked. What's your specialty?
Oh, I'm not really sure I have one of those, she said. I've never done magic without the help of a spell. All fairies have a specialty, Tangerina said, and she crossed her arms. Unless your specialty is that you're not special at all.
Tangerina, please keep your stinger to yourself, Madame Weatherberry reprimanded. So far, Bristol has shown talent for manifestation, and she has one of the brightest stars on my map of magic. Just because her specialty hasn't revealed itself yet doesn't mean it won't do so very soon.
Madame Weatherberry gave Bristol an encouraging wink, but that didn't make Tangerina's comments any less hurtful. Without an obvious specialty, Bristol felt inferior to the other students and started wondering if she even belonged at the academy. The embarrassment made her blush, and she counted down the seconds until her dinner was over.
Well, I know one thing for sure, Mrs. V said. My specialty has always been food. If anyone disagrees after that meal, they can go catch a griffin.
After dinner, Madame Weatherberry excused the students from the table, and they all went to their rooms to get ready for bed. Bristol was still feeling crummy from Tangerina's remarks, but unfortunately she knew the perfect remedy to take her mind off of it. She selected The Tales of Tibbet the Twitch, Volume 2, from her shelf and chose a fresh pair of reading glasses, crawling into her soft bed. While Bristol read the sequel of her favorite book, an abrupt storm blew in from the ocean and soaked the academy grounds. Bristol was startled by the booming thunder and flashes of lightning outside her window, but she wasn't going to let the weather disturb her first night at the castle. Her floor mates, however, weren't so brave. A few minutes into the storm, there was a soft knock on Bristol's door. "Come in," she called. The door swung open and Emeralda peeked inside with large, fearful eyes. "Hey, I'm sorry to bother you, Bristol," Emeralda said. "Is everything all right with your room?" Bristol asked. "No, yeah, everything is fine," she said. "It's just I'm not used to thunder. That's one of the best parts about living underground. You don't have to worry about weather. If you wouldn't mind, I was wondering, you're more than welcome to sleep in here if thunder is scaring you," Bristol said. Emeralda sighed with relief. "Oh, gee, thanks. What are you reading?" "The Tales of Tibbet the Twitch, Volume 2, Bristol said. "It's the sequel to my favorite book of all time. Have you heard of it?" Emeralda thought about it and shook her head. "No. Papa used to read stories before bed, but I don't remember that one." "Would you sleep better if I read the first one to you?" Bristol asked. "Really?" Emeralda said. "Are you sure you wouldn't mind?" "No, not at all," she said. "It's on the shelf to your left." Emeralda retrieved The Tales of Tibbet the Twitch and joined Bristol in bed. Bristol opened the book to the very first page, but before she started reading, both girls jumped at the growling thunder outside. It was followed by the sound of feet frantically running down the corridor. Xanthos appeared in the doorway, just as startled by the weather as Emeralda had been. Hi girls, Xanthos peeped. "Crazy storm, huh?" "It's wild," Bristol said. "How are you holding up?" "Me? Oh, yeah, I'm doing great," Xanthos said, but his panicked face told otherwise. I came to check on you two." "We're fine," Bristol said. "Actually, Emeralda and I were just about to start a book if you're interested in hearing the story." Another crack of thunder influenced Xanthos' decision, and he leapt into bed with the girls. Bristol and Emeralda were tickled by his reaction, and they made room. Bristol cleared her throat in preparation for reading aloud, and just as she started the first sentence, Tangerine and Skylene burst into her room and shut the door behind them, as if the terrible storm had been chasing them. It totally is nice. I was thinking the same thing. "Hello, ladies," Bristol said. "What seems to be the problem?" Tangerine and Skylene were too embarrassed to admit that they were scared. They looked at each other, hoping that one would come up with a good excuse. I wet the bed," Skylene said. Tangerine rolled her eyes. "Skylene, your bed is always wet," she whispered. "Oh, yeah," she mumbled back. We just heard noises coming from your room and we wanted to make sure that the three of you weren't causing any trouble, Tangerina said. Well, as you can see, we are being very well behaved, Bristol said. We're just about to read a book to calm our nerves. Well, good. I'm glad that you're not up to any mischief, Tangerina said. And now that we've seen you're acting appropriately, we'll just go back to our rooms. Although she said they were leaving, neither Tangerine nor Skylene moved a muscle. You know, just because apprentices are more advanced than students doesn't mean that they enjoy stories any less, Bristol said. You're both welcome to stay with us if the storm is making you uneasy. Before Tangerina or Skylene could respond, the thunder roared louder than before. The girls shrieked and dived into bed with the others. I suppose we can stick around for a few minutes, Tangerina said. What are you reading? The Tales of Tippet the Twitch by Tom Free Taylor, Bristol said. What's it about? Skylene asked. Emeralda grunted and eyed the others threateningly. If everyone would just shut up and stop interrupting, we might find out what it's about, she scolded. All the classmates went so quiet so Bristol could start the book. Once upon a time, there was a kingdom of mice, she read. Of all the mice in the kingdom, none was braver than a young mouse named Tidbit the Twitch. Bristol read the book for hours, and she was delighted by what a captive audience her floor mates were. Eventually, all the students and apprentices began to fall asleep. She marked their last page so they could continue the story tomorrow. They all slept in a pile on Bristol's bed while they waited for the weather to die down. It was only their first night in the castle, but thanks to a thunderstorm and a good story, the children at Madame Weatherbury's Academy of Magic were already acting like a chosen family, as their instructor hoped they would. Given that her name is Madame Weatherbury, she might have planned this. Just saying. I don't know, but probably. I love it. I love it. That was fantastic. Super cute. It was a very sweet chapter. I don't know if I will be on to make slime later. It's possible. I will, however, be posting signups for Thursday's Roll for Slime. Yeah, just a little. Later today, I'm going to be making video Roll for Slimes today so that I can ship them tomorrow when the post office reopens. So look out for those videos to go up. And some customs, and it's kind of the whole kit and caboodle, I think. All right, I love you all. I will see you later, and I hope you have a great day off if you have one. I am gonna get to work.